Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Zack Cherry. Zack, how you doing today, man?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, Ken.
Oh, this is such a huge honor for me. I've been a huge fan of yours for a very long time, and I put a thing out on our community tab asking who people would like to see on the show, and your name was a repeated smack on that tab, so I
Oh,
knew I had to get in contact with you pretty quickly.
oh, nice. What an honor. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before we talk about why you're here, Zach, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You are a Canadian YouTube creator, filmmaker, and podcaster. Since starting the channel in 2019, you've amassed over 140,000 subscribers, which is absolutely incredible. Congratulations. So well
Thank you.
deserved. And your Scream videos, especially the deep dives that you do into who did the kills and which Ghostface was which. What gave you the idea and the initiative to start making those type of videos?
I think it was just sort of like very happenstance. I knew that I wanted to dabble with YouTube in 2019, and I just sort of started as like, I guess like a lot of people do, of just movie reviews and stuff like that. And quickly, like I shifted away from that because I realized that, you have to have a niche on YouTube. And the thing that I always kept going back to was horror anyway. And for a while there, the new movie at the time, Scream 5, had been announced, and there was a lot of interest in it, but nobody was really talking about it on YouTube in a way yet. So I kind of jumped on that and became sort of like the channel to talk about like anything Scream 5. And it kind of like, I had a little bit of a monopoly there. I didn't have like a huge following at that point. I think I had like maybe like 1 or 2 thousand subscribers, but that also kind of like started to become something that I wasn't terribly interested in, like just talking about like news and speculation. And I just, you know, honed more in on like the Scream aspect of it and just like commentary about it and just like opinions and certain things like the who killed who. And that's when it really kind of took off and people really responded to that. And, I had looked online actually because there were videos from like maybe 10 or 12 years prior that like a few people had done who killed who's, but I guess like I was very thorough in a way, or just did it in a way that was, I guess, very dynamic for people to watch. So yeah, it became a thing, and it just kind of took off from there.
And it's a fun watch and a very fun follow to follow along and try to put the pieces together as you're watching the video as well. So if you guys haven't checked those out, I have all of Zach's social media links in the description, as well as the YouTube link and the link for his podcast, The Cherry Picker. You present weekly in-depth analysis on a variety of different horror movies. And as of this year, you've completed. This is something we talk about the podcast, we talk about YouTube, and those things are incredible. I'm so happy for the following you've amassed and that you're still having such a great time doing it, because that's what we do this for. Is obviously we like to entertain, but it's fun to do what we do.
Yeah.
And to watch you as a creator still having the amount of fun you're having, and yet you still want more. You just completed your work on Macabre, a horror short inspired by retro slashers and giallo films, which you co-wrote and co-directed. So I know you just finished it, so we can't get too deep into it, but can you tell us a little bit about Macabre?
Yeah, for sure. So I co-wrote and co-directed with my friend Eric Champney, and this was kind of based on something that we had initially conceived like probably back in like 2022. And we were just talking about like a concept for a horror movie, which I can't really go into detail about because that's
Right.
not really what the short film is. But we threw ideas back and forth for a while and always joked about like writing a script, but it never actually happened. And then I think like a year later, he kind of lit a fire under me. I was just like, "No, let's actually do this. Let's full on do this." So we did, and we started work on that, and we wrote a feature script. We're not actually like completely finished the scripts because we
Okay.
started and we got to a point where we realized that we wanted to make the opening scene a short film. So we kind of halted any sort of script writing at that point and just focused on the production of this, what turned out to be just under 17-minute short film. which required us to launch a Kickstarter campaign, which turned out to be like very successful. We raised over $50,000 US. Um, we shot it this past November in Connecticut, and we just finished post-production, which was a really long process, but uh, it's really exciting. It's all done now, and we're currently submitting to film festivals. So our goal is to garner some interest in that, and then at that point, if there is a call for it, we have the feature, and we can continue on from there.
And that's, I feel like that's, you look at some of these films that were ultra successful. Saw started off as a short film. Lights Out started off as a short film. You have
Mhm.
plenty of films that are genre staples that started off as the idea of a short film. And like you said, this is just essentially, you said, the intro to the full film, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
See, and there's so much more to build off, and I can't wait for people to be able to see it. So check your local film festivals. Keep your eye out for this. You guys are gonna want to check it out. So, Zach, in order for you to create film, create a podcast and a YouTube channel that are pretty horror centric, horror had to start for you somewhere. So now, my friend, I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first
Yeah.
horror movie. And Zach, the first horror movie you watched was.
Witchboard 2, The Devil's Doorway, which was just a very random thing that, I came upon. But at that point, I was kind of already immersed in gateway horror as it is. Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps was like a big staple for me. Like the TV shows, I had like the Goosebumps books and all that. So that was kind of like more in the forefront for me at the time. And we had a friend of the family who had a summer home, and we would go there sometimes. And this one weekend we were there, and uh, his teenage daughter, I was 10. I think she was like maybe a few years older than me, but she had rented Witchboard 2 on VHS because that's we didn't have DVDs back then. And she had put it on, and I guess I don't know if there was like parent supervision or where the adults were, but even if they did, I guess it was okay for me to watch this. But I watched it, and I was so like drawn into what was happening because it felt like the things that I was already used to, but on a much more grand level, just because this is a feature rather than just like short episodes of television. And of course, like production values are much higher in these like movies than they are on TV. And I just I got really absorbed into it, and then from that point on, I had to watch. I think the next thing that I watched was the first Witchboard. So I think it was like several weeks later uh, that when we went back to this friend of the family's summer house, that I went and rented the movie because that was the thing. Like at home, I think that there's like specific rules. I probably couldn't have like rented a horror movie, mostly because like my stepdad didn't want to watch that. So when we went to the video store, there was like very specific things that we would see. But when we were you know wherever during the weekend, I think that there was a little bit more leeway. So I rented that and watched it by myself, and just slowly like started to get more acclimated to horror as a genre at that point.
And for those of you that haven't seen Witchboard 2, this is a very fun movie. If you go into this looking for an Academy Award winning picture, you're going to be let down. But if you go into this looking for just a silly horror movie that you can have a good time with, I have the link in the description as well because this movie is free on YouTube and I had a blast rewatching this. Haven't watched it in years, but man, you, like one thing for me watching this movie again, I realized that the guy from Leprechaun 3 that turns into a leprechaun, the main character, is in this movie.
Okay.
And I'm just like, gosh, like I can't remember seeing him in anything else except for Leprechaun 3. And then I see him in this role, and that's all I can see. And there's a lot of effective scenery throughout this movie, especially for a young man. Do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most when you were young?
That's the thing. Like at the time watching it when you're 10 years old, you don't really like think about things like just like the aspects of filmmaking. And I know that like I've seen this movie probably 3 times in my life, and the most recent was like last week because I knew that, we were going to be talking about it, and I watched it on YouTube. And I think I had watched it maybe like 12 years ago or something, and just was just like, what is this? This is terrible. And I think that like since then, like my appreciation for certain things has changed. But when I watched it last week, I was just really kind of blown away by a lot of the cinematography in this, because it's like that's where like this movie really stands out. And I think that's the thing that really I respond to the most, when I watch a movie. It's just like visually what the presentation is. And even though it's like not a great script, there's so many innovative camera techniques that I see in it. Like the main character, she lives in this artist loft, so they really like make great use of this location. And there's just like these like sweeping tracking shots that like go through the glass in the window. Like I'm still like trying to figure out how they did that.
That's a
There's
great
one
shot.
scene where I guess because it's like whenever we're in the POV of the demonic spirit, it kind of goes into these shots, and there's like one coming down a chimney chute. There's another where it goes through a car, where you can see that they removed the windshields and like the back window as well. But it's just like you look at that and you like think like, how were they able to do that? Did they, I guess, like mount the camera onto like a long pole and maybe had the car on a track and just like slowly drove it in, so like the camera goes like all the way through the car, and then they just slowed it down in post. Like it looks dangerous, especially because it's not a stunt actor, it's like the actual actor that
Yeah.
we see. But but it's the kind of cinematography that just like it, for a movie that is really like not all that, it just makes it like look grander scale, which, I think that that's the thing that really connected me to it when I was 10, of just like seeing something that, kind of blew me away because it was so magnificent in its presentation.
And you see something like that when you're 10 too, like when you have her looking at the Ouija board and the hand comes up out of the Ouija board.
Hmm.
You have things like that, that will really stick with you. Or when she's looking down at the table and then she goes to touch and the other woman comes up and grabs her, the ghost grabs her. When we're
Yeah.
kids, we see stuff like that and it's like, damn, because we were already scared of Ouija boards. I think that's something that's
Mhm.
instilled in all of us at a young age is Ouija boards are evil. That's bad. Or in this
Yeah.
case, a witch board. That's what they used to be called, a witch board. So um, as horror fans, we do love the kills as well. And this movie has a couple very unique kills. Do you remember which kill it was that stayed with you, or the one that I hate saying favorite 'cause that's dark, but the kill that
Yeah.
resonated the most?
Um, that's the thing. Like, I didn't really remember a lot of it. I remembered the wrecking ball. But I didn't remember the circumstances around it. Like that's the thing. Like I had a very vague memory of just like certain events in the movie. So it was just like interesting seeing it again. But I don't really like watching this movie. I don't think that like the kills are really a standout, or there's like any set piece that's really brilliant. I mean, that's probably, not one of the weakest aspects of it, but it's not as strong as like some of the other things that I already talked about. Did you have one?
Well, I think that what I love about this movie is obviously this is years before Final Destination, but every kill has that Final Destination like build up where you like with the wrecking ball, you see everything coming into place, and then you see the gears moving, or the guy in
Hmm.
the basement that gets burned, like you see the saw start to spin and then go after him, and then the
Yeah.
boiler comes on and burns him. Like they have these like almost foreshadowy type kills, which I think works really good. I love when a movie can do that and execute it very well.
Hmm.
Um, and then you have the whole time. I don't want to spoil it. I mean, the movie's old enough. I can spoil it. If you guys haven't seen it, it's in the description. You find out who the killer is after the killer's already dead. Like, I thought that was a really cool way that they put things into perspective for you. Like,
Yeah.
not the ghost, but the person that killed our human being to make them a ghost. You find out
Yeah.
the identity of them after they've already died. I thought that was pretty unique.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting you say that, because that's one of like, not that I really like have a complaint about this movie or anything, because I take it at face value. But I think like comparative to like the first Witchboard, which the the ghost was like the ghost of a serial killer, where in this one the ghost was a victim of a killer. So there was sort of like a murder mystery aspect to it, but I don't feel like that it was executed the way that the way that I like my murder mysteries.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that like the pieces were all there, but like for me, I don't think that it came together in the way that it could have.
Which is fair. You know,
Yeah.
I think that, we could have gotten the wrecking ball afterwards, after everything had happened. I think that might have made a little bit more of an impact, but
Yeah.
um, we always talk about, especially when I'm doing my first horror movie with somebody, remakes, requels, sequels, it's all the rage. Now, we know Witchboard does have a remake that is coming out in August.
Yeah,
It was
that's
filmed
true.
last year. It's coming out in August. Are you excited about the Witchboard remake, or is this something you kind of wish they would have let a sleeping dog lie on?
I actually am. And the reason why is because like I'm not a huge fan of remakes. Like I think like the mid 2000s and just like the trend of like remaking everything is like one of my least favorite eras of horror. And I think that I see a lot of people making excuses for the remakes, and it's just like, oh, it's just like a new version for a new audience. But when I was getting into horror for the first time, like I wasn't just like strictly watching movies that were coming out in the 90s. I would go back to the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and watch everything I did because that was just like you have an appreciation for the genre. You want to get as immersed in it as possible. And I think that for a lot of the movies that were getting remade in the 2000s, it's it's almost like the it's the perfect version of that movie. Like you can't make it better, and then that's why you see things like, and I'm just gonna throw Carrie under the bus as a remake, is that I watch something like that and I see scenes that are so beloved in the original, and I'm watching them play out in like the 2000 and what is the 13 or 14 version,
Mhm.
where it just feels like in order to be different, they're intentionally going for the less interesting uh creative decision, whether that be like the acting or like the direction or the cinematography. It's just like, oh, you thought we were going to go this way, we're actually going to go this way, which would normally be exciting, but like it's like a want 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 rather than what we're
Right.
used to. And I think that the thing is like you can remake a horror movie and that's perfectly fine, but you should remake the movies that had like really interesting concepts but maybe not the best execution. But what we've been seeing mostly is just movies that have really good concepts, but already have like the best execution possible. So there's nowhere to go but downhill from there. And I think that Witchboard is a movie that's not like wholly remembered. Like it's not like up in the zeitgeist of just like the most popular movies from the 80s. And I even like when I watched that one again a few months ago, and it was kind of boring, to be honest. Like there was things about it that I really liked, but I felt like this is the perfect concept for a movie that they could remake and they could actually improve upon. So yes, so in a very long roundabout way, I am excited for the Witchboard remake.
I've always said that. If you're going to remake a movie, stop with the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the stuff like that. Go for movies like Witchboard. Sometimes they come back. Things like that that didn't have the execution. Sometimes they come back. One of my favorite Stephen King adaptions was a made for TV movie. And if you could give that movie the type of budget to make it a full on remake, now I think it could be a very successful film. And same thing with Witchboard. And I agree with you. If we're going to do a movie, don't do a movie that's already beloved. We don't need Exorcist Believer. That's something that we don't need at the time. And you remake these movies that had great ideas and not the greatest execution. I think that's the most brilliant way that you
Yeah.
could possibly put that.
Yeah, or even in a way that like is updated in a more contemporary way. Because like I really appreciated the Dark Castle remakes of the late 90s, early 2000s, because those felt like they were taking kind of like very antiquated horror movies and introducing them into the new millennium. So I think that, even like 13 Ghosts, for example, I don't think the original is even really that great of a movie, but the remake, for all of the flaws that it has, I think that it's just like a beautifully constructed movie. Just like the art direction, just like the design of the ghosts, the house, all of that stuff is just so great to look at. And I think that like the Dark Castle remakes like really have this sort of like carnival aspect to them that makes them very entertaining. And I wish that the remake trend had really kind of followed that pattern rather than more, I guess, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Dawn of the Dead, of just like taking all these popular IPs and redoing them.
For money.
Yeah.
It's funny because you talk about 13 Ghosts. I agree with the fact that the 13 Ghosts remake is so much, it's polar opposite of the original.
Hmm.
Like such polar opposite. Like we did an episode on it, and I remember like the one thing I remember from the original is there's like literally a 3 minute shot of a ghost horse, and it's just that shot forever, and you're like, all right, like I'm putting the glasses on and off, which I thought was cool that in the remake they incorporated the glasses into the movie. Like I thought that was brilliant as well. So,
Right.
um, I love talking about how horror started for you with Witchboard 2, but here for a second, I do want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. I think I know the answer, but it's in
Yeah,
my
sure.
script, so I gotta ask. My little buddy Ghostface is here, Zach, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Zach? What is your favorite horror movie of all
Oh,
time?
wow. It always changes. Like there's rotation. I think that like it's easy. You could say Scream. Personally, I would choose Scream 2 over Scream these days. But The Shining is always a popular one, The Thing. So I try to be a little bit more unique or just something to my personality. So I'd say that Tenebrae, Dario Argento, is probably my favorite horror movie, and it's the one that I can just watch over and over again. Like I probably watch it like once every 2 months or so, and like it never gets old for me.
And I know that you're a big Giallo fan too.
Yeah.
Um, where did I gotta ask, where did your love for Giallo start?
Um, Probably my sister. Like she was a fan before me. Like she was always like a big horror fan, and like she's older than me, so she sort of like already had this knowledge of things, and like her fandom was always like very far reaching. Like she'd be into more like obscure and cult pictures, so if I was ever like spending time with her, she would introduce me to certain things, and that's all it takes is just like you show me one thing and then I'll go down the rabbit hole on my own and find all the things myself. So I think that that's probably where it started.
And it's amazing because you talked earlier about going to the video store. My mom and dad owned a mom and pop video store when I was a kid called Downtown Video, and like that's where my love of horror started. YouTube was walking up and down the horror aisle looking at cases trying to figure out which cover art jumped out at us the most, and I was the big brother in this situation. You had your older sister, I was the big brother, to Donovan, Crystal, Kendra, Jake, and I was the one that was showing them the horror movies that I fell in love with, and to this day they're still like, yeah, horror, cool. Whatever, you scared the shit out of me as a kid, so go to hell.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that with you it helped to increase your love of the genre.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that was, one of my favorite memories because I've worked in like video stores like when I was like 14. And the horror section is always my favorite, and I think that like it's almost like an art gallery because
Hmm.
you're walking through and like it's just they don't make key art like that anymore. Like that's where like I first saw like the poster for Hellraiser just like on the front of the VHS, and I had no idea what it was. Like I was scared to like even watch it. I thought it was going to be this like horrific thing, which I mean it is in its
Hmm.
own right, but it's just like you just like these are works of art, and I feel that everything is so, I guess, like there's just like a template now or just like whatever the studios want, and it like every poster just feels very milk toast, very safe, like it's trying to draw
Yeah.
in a very wide audience without really honing in on what the movie is. And I think that like that's why I have such an appreciation for these artists who are out there like making their own fan art and like creations of different posters and selling them. And actually, I mean, if I could shout out one, Matthew Terrian, because he was the one who we commissioned him to do the key art for Macabre. And the whole idea of that was to just sort of like evoke the spirit of like these horror movies from the 80s where artwork was sort of like this beast to beholden, because you don't see that, and it's something that I feel like if the Academy Awards had a category for best poster, I think that studios would start to care again. But like you
Yeah.
look at like the poster for Jaws, and Jaws is not even like, one of my favorite movies, but like that is such an iconic poster.
Her up on the top of the water and
everyone knows that poster, and it's just like it's one of the
Yeah.
best posters of all time. And it's just like it's crazy that studios look at something like that now and they're just like, well, we're not even going to try to emulate something like that, and or the success that came from that because they've got their own style of doing things.
And it is a bummer because that's how the first horror movie I ever watched was House from 1985. And that was, that hand hitting the doorbell, ding dong, you're dead. Like that was
Mhm.
like the scariest looking thing I had ever seen. And then you had like you said, Hellraiser. That was a huge one when I was a kid. Friday the 13th Part 3 with the machete coming out. Like all these really attracted me to these films. And now with the internet the way it is, like you said, Creepy Duck does a great job, creating posters, and I love seeing all these different unique takes on posters. I'm with you. I'm still a huge fan of posters. I got a whole, roll over there full of old movie posters that I just absolutely adore, and I wish we could go back to that's your main source of advertising.
Mhm.
Like when we were young, you would see a poster at the movie theater and be like, I wonder what that movie's going to be about. You couldn't YouTube the trailer right on the spot, you
Yeah.
know or you saw a trailer before you saw a movie, then 6 months later you saw it on the video store shelf a year later, and you're like, oh, I remember that. Let's grab that one. So it's
Mhm.
it's amazing to see how times have changed in that regard.
Yeah, and not for the better. So hopefully that's something that we can start to shift back to, because yeah, we do need better key art coming back.
Yes. Well, Zach, I have had an amazing time talking about your first horror movie, how amazing your career's been, whether it be through YouTube, podcasting, or the upcoming film. Um, but before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to go back to Witchboard 2. And what we're going to do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction. We're not being critics. All we're doing, Zach, is ranking this movie on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So, 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Zach, what would your ranking of Witchboard 2 be?
Oh wow. I I try not to like give things number rankings anymore these days, but I guess I'll make an exception. I Let's go for 3.5 skulls,
Mhm.
I'll say.
And I think it's more fun when you're ranking it on how effective it was to you rather than, like you said, being critics. That's something you do as a job all the time. You don't want to have to keep doing the same thing over and over, but you can
Yeah.
have a movie that is absolutely dog shit and it's, a 5 for you because of how much it means to you and how much it affected you. So I do like, that you're still willing to be able to do something like that. And I know I said it at the beginning, guys, but all of Zach's links are down in the description. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, the podcast, follow on social media. That way you can have your updates on when you will be able to check out Macabre at your local film festival. So, Zach, please don't go anywhere. I do have a couple more questions for you. Uh, Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. It does help build the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Those links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.